The case of Wilma Anderson. On November 14, 2019, a 17-year-old girl named Wilma Anderson disappeared after visiting her ex-boyfriend, Tishko Ahmed, in Uddevalla, Sweden. Wilma had gone to retrieve her belongings after their breakup, but this would be the last time she was seen alive. As the investigation progressed, the detective's way of uncovering things shocked everyone. This is the haunting case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson was born to Linda and Marcus Anderson. However, due to family struggles and their divorce, Wilma was unable to live with either parent. Despite this, her mother remained deeply involved in her life, while Wilma stayed with her sister, Emily, whom their mother described as a vibrant and future-minded girl. Wilma was a sociable person, surrounded by an active social circle that filled her days. She adored social media, frequently sharing snapshots of her life on Facebook, and relished every opportunity to be captured in photographs, showcasing her innate creativity and unwavering spirit. At the age of 15, Wilma met a 20-year-old man named Tishko Ahmed Shabazz in Sweden. Despite the 5-year age difference, there were no legal obstacles to their relationship, as the age of consent in Sweden is 15. Wilma's mother had reservations about her daughter dating an older individual but reluctantly accepted her choice, trusting her daughter's judgment. Tishko, originally from Iraq, had relocated to Sweden at the age of 8, residing with his father and stepmother. Accounts from Tishko's friend depicted a school life marked by bullying. But as he matured, he developed an unwavering resolve, refusing to back down from any challenge he faced. He gained his Swedish citizenship in 2014 and eventually found employment in the care sector after completing his education in 2018. Wilma and Tishko took a significant step, moving in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. Initially, their relationship was smooth, but it eventually shifted, taking a darker and more troubling turn. Tishko's demeanor grew increasingly controlling, a change that did not escape Wilma's mother, who had noticed her daughter's altered behavior over the 2 years spent with her boyfriend. Wilma frequently confided in her sister Emily about the turbulent relationship with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, while on the phone with Emily, Wilma revealed her intention to end the relationship during her visit to Tishko's apartment to collect her belongings. She expressed her exhaustion with Tishko's incessant control over her life, dictating what she wore, where she went, who she talked to, and even her makeup. Feeling suffocated by his domineering and abusive behavior, she had had enough and simply wanted it to end. Upon Tishko's return from work, Wilma ended the call, saying she had to go, possibly wanting to conclude what had brought her to Tishko's apartment. Sadly, this would be the last time her sister or any of her loved ones would hear from her. Later, Emily desperately tried to contact her sister, but the calls went unanswered. The following day, November 15th, Wilma had a dentist appointment, but she didn't show up. On November 17th, Wilma's worried parents went to the apartment she shared with her boyfriend. After knocking for what felt like a long time, the door finally opened, revealing Tishko. Linda, deeply concerned, questioned Tishko about Wilma's whereabouts, noticing his distant demeanor. She suspected he might have been under the influence, but she and her husband persisted, determined to get answers. Tishko admitted that their relationship had ended, claiming Wilma had left after collecting her belongings and that he had no idea where she was currently, adding that he didn't expect to reconnect with her anytime soon. They entered the apartment, hoping to further investigate the situation by having a brief conversation. Tishko recounted the evening's events to Wilma's parents, a heated argument that had occurred upon his return from work around 5:30 p.m., which led to Wilma leaving their relationship. Initially, Tishko and Wilma had an unpredictable and on-and-off relationship, primarily due to Tishko's behavior toward Wilma. Her parents were not overly alarmed at first, as this was not an unusual occurrence. Meanwhile, Emily, Wilma's sister, was deeply concerned and turned to Facebook, urgently seeking information about her missing sister. Emily's posts detailed Wilma's disappearance since November 14th, emphasizing the lack of communication, which was a stark deviation from Wilma's habitual contact with her family. Emily described Wilma's physical appearance, highlighting her height of 165 centimeters, her dark hair with blonde highlights, and expressed the distress at her sudden disappearance, a departure from her usual behavior. The police promptly filed a report and started collecting statements from family and friends, determined to trace Wilma's last known interactions. They investigated who had recently spoken to or seen the missing girl. Linda and Emily confirmed they had not had any contact with Wilma since November 14th, and their calls had remained unanswered. Joining forces, a search party was assembled, blending police efforts with the support of friends and family, and utilizing police dogs and drone technology to search inaccessible areas for any trace of Wilma. When authorities approached Tishko, he claimed and asserted that he had no knowledge of Wilma's whereabouts, and neither had he received any recent communication from her. By Sunday, November 17th, 3 days into the search, the concerning silence from Wilma still persisted. Wilma, who was typically active on social media, had now gone silent for an alarming period. The urgency increased as around 5,000 people came together fervently, joining the search in a collective effort to find her. The police persistently returned to Tishko seeking information, but he steadfastly maintained his ignorance about Wilma's whereabouts. His claims suggested that after their breakup, she had moved on to another man. However, this supposed narrative lacked any substantiated evidence, leaving her friends and family baffled and in the dark. Concurrently, Wilma's family revealed a distressing narrative to the authorities. They lamented how their daughter's life had taken a drastic downturn since her involvement with Tishko Ahmed, painting a stark contrast to her once vibrant and sociable self. Linda unveiled the pervasive control Tishko had exerted over her, dictating her every move and scrutinizing her whereabouts. Emily disclosed Wilma's unsettling revelations, where she admitted to Tishko's violent behavior in the final stages of their relationship. Despite the turmoil, Wilma still harbored a deep affection for Tishko. Tishko had gone to great lengths by installing a GPS device on Wilma's phone, allowing him constant monitoring of her location at all times. A series of text messages between Wilma and Tishko revealed the disturbing reality of Tishko's controlling behavior. In one exchange from a previous argument, Wilma had pleaded, "Contact me when you think you can trust me," to which Tishko had responded, "Contact me when you know your place." The police, intent on uncovering the truth, delved into Tishko's final movements. Tishko adamantly claimed he hadn't left the apartment after arriving home from work at 5 p.m. Authorities wanted to make sure he was telling the truth and therefore retraced Tishko's movements by tracking his phone's GPS. CCTV footage had captured Tishko at a supermarket around 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma disappeared. He then returned home from work by 5 p.m. Neighbors recounted a heated, escalating argument between the couple at around 6 p.m., an occurrence not uncommon, but this one was louder than usual. Concerned, one neighbor ventured to check on them, only to encounter an eerie silence just as they neared the apartment door to knock. No one was arguing anymore. It was dead silent. This strange silence prompted unease, but the neighbor, confused about what to do next, just retreated to their apartment. The police meticulously pieced together Tishko's movements, extending their investigation to his workplace and the company vehicle he used, requesting forensic testing on it. The GPS in the car revealed his movements from Thursday the 14th to Monday the 18th, indicating visits to clients interspersed with returns to his own residence throughout his usual work hours during those days. On the day of the heated argument, Tishko's phone revealed that he left his apartment around 6:30 p.m. as dusk settled. Witnesses spotted him striding along the freeway, a solitary figure shrouded in all black attire. A passing motorcyclist described him as visibly distant, lost in his thoughts. Law enforcement intercepted Tishko and escorted him. Upon questioning, Tishko explained that his intention was to catch a train, but he changed his mind and decided to take a contemplative walk home instead. However, an official report was never filed, leaving a gap in the recorded events on November 19, 2019. The unfolding events led to Tishko's arrest. He had visible scratches on his forearms, and a search of his apartment uncovered unsettling clues. Wilma's belongings, including her bag and coat, were hanging in their usual places. Further discoveries awaited investigators that Tuesday night, as her shoes and eyeglasses were also found. Linda emphasized her daughter's attachment to her bag. The examination revealed a trail of bloodstains splattered across the walls and floors of every room, suggesting a violent struggle throughout the apartment. As the investigators pieced together the evidence, a sinister narrative emerged. Traces of blood trailed from the living room to the bedroom, painting a haunting picture of something being dragged. The bed bore a grim imprint, a haunting shape of a torso, highlighted by the revealing glow of blue star. The discovery of muscle tissue on a knife and splattered across the living room wall only added to the gruesome mosaic of the crime scene. The sheer amount of blood found suggested a scene of extreme violence, making survival unlikely. Outside the apartment, the search continued, uncovering trash bags containing Tishko's bedding, stained with clear signs of blood. Confronted at the police station, Tishko was presented with the incriminating evidence, which he promptly denied any knowledge of, firmly asserting that he would be aware of any substantial bloodshed in his own residence. Meanwhile, the quest to find Wilma intensified with an ever-growing throng of individuals rallying daily, determined to aid in her search, fueling hope amidst the encroaching darkness of the unfolding tragedy. The apartment where Wilma was last seen turned into a stark crime scene, yet all attempts to establish contact with her remained fruitless. Then, on November 28th, 2 weeks since Wilma vanished without a trace, cadaver dogs were enlisted for assistance at the crime scene. These trained canines, specialized in detecting scents associated with deceased individuals, ventured into the bedroom and swiftly signaled a chilling indication. A deceased person or human remains had likely been in that very area. Moreover, a distinct odor permeated the apartment, heightening the grim atmosphere. Despite prior searches, the police meticulously re-examined the bedroom, drawn to the area marked by the dogs. Their focus honed in on a wardrobe, seemingly just another piece of furniture in the room. Yet within that innocuous wardrobe lay a small travel case, seemingly inconspicuous among the room's contents. Although previously overlooked, the officers, driven by instinct, seized the case, poised to uncover its secrets. Inside, investigators discovered a large object concealed within aluminum kitchen foil. A harrowing revelation met with bloodstains in the case's interior. As they cautiously unraveled the foil's contents, a heart-wrenching and shocking reality awaited them. Wilma's decapitated head lay shrouded within. The head had been wrapped meticulously and bound with tape, and the travel case had become a repository of the horrifying events that had happened to Wilma. The case was dispatched to Gothenburg's forensic labs for further testing, where detailed examination revealed Tishko's fingerprints, an ominous connection tying him to the heinous act. Additionally, at the crime scene where the thrown-away garbage bags were found, a footstep marked with Wilma's blood showed Tishko's clear footprint. The sad discoveries revealed the savageness of the crime. Medical examiners, although not able to definitively determine the reason for Wilma's death, pointed out serious head and eye wounds caused by a harsh blow. The horrific act of cutting off her head resulted in additional injuries to her head. Wilma's heartbroken family learned the heartbreaking truth about their daughter's destiny. Linda, driven by strong determination, joined the search operations, no longer looking for their missing loved one, but sadly, hunting for the rest of Wilma's remains. The family, thrown into the worst of nightmares, faced the shocking details emerging from the proof found in the walls of the apartment. A dreadful truth came to light. Wilma's final moments probably took place in the living room, where she was subjected to a violent attack. Her world was shattered by a devastating head strike, leaving behind a haunting trace of violence. The Swedish authorities filed a report that detailed Tishko's denial of Andersson's murder, vehemently asserting his innocence. His unsettling statement echoed, insisting on a warped sense of affection. "You forget that this is a girl that I have loved, and that I have lived my life perfectly. If I had murdered my girl, I would not have saved her head." Law enforcement had secured ample evidence to press charges against Tishko, and his trial was set for May 2020. However, Wilma's body remained undiscovered throughout the entire court proceedings. Shabazz, devoid of any display of remorse or emotion, stood stoic amidst the relentless investigation. Reports surfaced painting a disturbing picture of his beliefs. Allegations that he viewed his ex-girlfriend as a figure of malevolence, associating her with Satan and espousing outlandish claims of her collaboration with Democrats against the then U.S. President Donald Trump. His bizarre hero worship of the president even led to a failed attempt to join Trump's campaign, halted due to inadequate entry documents. Attempts to plead not guilty by reason of insanity during the trial, by citing these absurd beliefs and claims of Wilma as proof of insanity by his defense, fell short. On July 27, 2020, the verdict sealed Tishko's fate. The court pronounced 23-year-old Tishko Shabazz Ahmed guilty of 17-year-old Wilma Anderson's murder, handing down a life sentence, which was later reduced to 18 years by the Court of Appeal. The baffling reduction of the sentence stemmed from the absence of concrete evidence pinpointing the exact cause of Wilma's demise or the sequence of events due to the absence of her body, a haunting absence that left critical questions unanswered, hindering the pursuit of justice. In late 2020, Wilma's funeral brought a solemn closure to this tragic saga, a heart-wrenching conclusion that undoubtedly plunged Wilma's family into unfathomable sorrow. Our deepest sympathies go out to the life lost too soon and the grieving loved ones she left behind. The Maria Alejandra La Fuente Casco case. Maria Alejandra La Fuente Casco was a charming young Mexican psychologist. Well known for her love of staying fit and active, she took great care of her petite figure, delighting in her own beauty and charm. With her light, wheat-colored complexion, long black hair, full lips, and deep-set eyes, she was a sight to behold. Maria Alejandra loved spending time at the beach, basking in the sun to maintain her impeccable tan. Following in her father's footsteps, the esteemed psychologist and renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Alberto Eduardo, Maria Alejandra held a deep admiration for her father, which ultimately inspired her to pursue a career in psychology. She specialized in treating adolescents and young adults dealing with depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders. Her practice was located in the Roma Sur neighborhood in Mexico City. As a divorcee and a mother of two, Maria Alejandra was eager to find love again and create a new home for her family. However, her divorce had not been amicable. In fact, in 2011, she became involved in a shocking incident against her ex-husband. According to his statements, which remain anonymous as per authorities' decision, the incident occurred after their separation. He had gone to visit their children when Maria Alejandra asked him to enter the living room and sit on a strangely plastic-covered sofa. At first, he refused, but she insisted, claiming their daughter had a surprise for him. Reluctantly, he agreed to blindfold himself and take a seat. After several minutes of silence, not hearing any sounds from his daughter or Maria Alejandra, he grew suspicious. Just as he was confirming his suspicions, he felt a severe blow to his head, struck by the fireplace poker. Instantly removing his blindfold, he pleaded with his ex-wife to calm down, but she continued her assault. In a desperate attempt to escape, he realized the door was locked. With her ex-husband now fully at her mercy, Maria Alejandra grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed him in the abdomen and back. Cornered and in severe pain, he tried to wrest the knife from her grasp, only for her to bite his arm. The woman tried to inject him with a substance using a syringe, but he struggled and managed to get her off of him, eventually escaping. The couple's daughter, who had witnessed her parents violently confront each other on numerous occasions, saw everything that happened that traumatic night. In none of the previous instances of violence had the couple sought intervention from authorities. However, this time was different. The man believed that Maria Alejandra had gone too far, so he decided to report her. According to the files, the psychologist was accused by the Homicide Prosecutor's Office of the Mexico City Attorney General's Office of attempted homicide. Maria Alejandra was taken to jail, and the 67th criminal judge issued a pretrial detention order. Later, the charge was reclassified to attempted mitigated homicide. On June 14, 2012, she was sentenced to serve 1 year and 4 months in prison. However, Maria Alejandra and her lawyers quickly mobilized to obtain various benefits. As a result, she was released after obtaining a sentence substitution for the payment of fines, as well as conditional suspension of the sentence. For compensation for material damage, a fine of 18,843 Mexican pesos, approximately $1,009 at the current exchange rate, was imposed, and for moral damages compensation, 31,200 pesos, approximately $1,836. Despite obtaining these advantages, the defense lawyers were dissatisfied with the judicial resolution. They argued that Maria Alejandra had acted in self-defense, claiming that her ex-husband used to beat her. Therefore, they filed an appeal against the sentence, which was reviewed by the magistrates of the 9th Criminal Chamber. Ultimately, these magistrates determined that the woman was not criminally responsible and ordered her full release, lifting the sentence. Upon her release, Maria Alejandra returned to her psychology practice as if nothing had happened. The image she projected ultimately worked in her favor, as she presented herself as an empowered victim who had overcome gender violence. But with a new life came a new victim. Back in her practice, Maria Alejandra met Alan Carrera Cuellar, a 41-year-old Mexican businessman. The man was the son of Adrian Carrera Fuentes, a former director of the now-defunct Federal Judicial Police, who had had a long and fruitful career in law enforcement, holding chief positions in different institutions. Adrian, Alan's father, established several businesses aimed at supplying the construction sector with materials. He specialized mainly in the sale of tiles and founded a chain of stores in southern Mexico. While his commercial establishments were legitimate, Adrian had mafia connections. Consequently, he was removed from his position to face legal proceedings and was charged due to his direct ties with the Juarez cartel, a Mexican criminal organization involved in drug trafficking and other illicit activities. This group controlled a significant percentage of drug trafficking from Mexico to the United States. The organization was led by Amado Carrillo, who died in 1997 in a Mexico City hospital after undergoing extensive plastic surgery to change his appearance. Adrian was accused of providing protection to both Carrillo and Juan Garcia, the leader of the Gulf Cartel. Garcia was on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list in the 1990s until his arrest in January 1996. He was later extradited to the United States, where he was convicted on 22 counts of money laundering, drug possession, and trafficking. These events are significant due to their direct and indirect impact on Alan's life. Since Adrian was associated with such influential figures in the criminal world, it was anticipated, given the accumulated evidence against him and his own confession, that he would spend at least 20 years in prison. However, by participating in the Witness Protection Program during the investigation of the Juarez cartel by the Attorney General's Office of Mexico, he was released on July 18, 2000, to dedicate himself entirely to his businesses. Meanwhile, Alan joined the family business, managing the tile stores founded by his influential father. This role not only helped him earn a good income, but also left him with a lot of free time. He was married and had a daughter, but in early 2011, he divorced his wife, leaving him devastated, depressed, and struggling with alcoholism. That's when he decided to seek therapy and started attending psychological consultations with Alberto, Maria Alejandra's father. At the same time, his teenage daughter, affected by her parents' breakup, started attending sessions with a psychologist to learn how to cope with the consequences of their separation and to manage this traumatic process. Her father's therapist recommended this, and she ended up discussing her issues with Maria Alejandra. Alan accompanied his daughter to the clinic, and after the third session, Maria Alejandra asked the girl to introduce her to her father, claiming professional reasons. She said she wanted to talk to him to make better progress in therapy. However, this was just an excuse, as Maria Alejandra wanted to get to know Alan on a personal level. It didn't take long for them to start a romantic relationship. When the teenager found out, she was furious and stopped attending the sessions, but not before confronting Maria Alejandra about her misconduct. Maria Alejandra, assertive and intimidating, threatened to kill the young girl if she interfered with the new relationship. After a few weeks, what started as casual dates and romantic encounters turned into a formal marriage proposal from Alan. He decided to start a new life with Maria Alejandra, completely unaware of the reasons behind her separation from her ex-husband. One weekend in April 2014, Alan went to visit his family and introduced Maria Alejandra as his soon-to-be wife. They informed everyone that they would be getting married within a week, and she even mentioned that she might be pregnant. The wedding took place the following Monday, but no members of the Carrera family attended. They weren't invited under the premise that the ceremony would be very intimate. Only Maria Alejandra's father, his wife, and their children attended. Maria Alejandra, seemingly perfect, soon revealed her true nature. After the wedding, things started to change drastically. The newlyweds' relationship began to turn tumultuous. Though there are not many details about what transpired between them, as Alan was a very reserved man, it is known that violence escalated in their interactions. Alan's family disapproved of his relationship with Maria Alejandra, noticing that he became more prone to anger and seemed increasingly worried. For this reason, all of Alan's loved ones preferred to keep their distance from his wife. At some point, Maria Alejandra, who had no regard for privacy, went through Alan's phone and allegedly found compromising messages that suggested he was involved with another woman. She claimed this was the final straw, stating that she was tired of enduring constant mistreatment from Alan and was unwilling to tolerate his infidelity as well. Convinced that trying to save the relationship was futile, she did not want to try therapy. She also didn't consider legally ending the relationship through a divorce, as they both had done with their previous marriages. To her, there was only one way to solve the problem: eliminate her husband. From that point on, she coldly calculated every step to execute her plan perfectly. Meanwhile, Alan seemed unaware of the extent of the conflict with Maria Alejandra and maintained his work routines and contact with his family. Despite the family's differences with his new wife, Alan remained close to his loved ones, communicating daily through WhatsApp. They respected his decisions, and although they found the marriage to be somewhat rushed, they continued to support him. Surprisingly, the family contact dynamic changed abruptly. On October 31st, 2014, Alan exchanged messages with his family for the last time. Overnight, everyone lost contact with him. He didn't show up at work, at his parents' house, or at his daughter's house. Additionally, while he responded to text messages, they seemed to be written strangely. He didn't answer phone calls or send voice messages. On November 5th, 2014, Maria Alejandra executed her plan with premeditation and cold blood. She waited for her husband to return home from work and gave him a glass containing a drink laced with a psychoactive drug used to treat depression and other mood disorders. The drug has sedative effects due to its composition, and it's a prescription medication that causes drowsiness and impairs movement. Once she was sure he was completely sedated, Maria Alejandra showed no mercy. She stabbed Alan in the abdomen with a sharp kitchen tool while he was defenseless, waiting for him to take his last breath. The next step was to dispose of the body. She placed it on the bedroom floor and used an electric saw to dismember his body into pieces that she could handle and store in plastic garbage bags. To facilitate transportation, she put the bags into a red suitcase. The body parts that could help identify him were placed in another bag and stored in her kitchen freezer. Once everything was in order, around 12:45 a.m., she called the security guards of the private housing estate where she lived. She asked for help to load the suitcase into her van, as recorded in the security logbook of that day. The condominium security personnel found her extremely nervous and desperate, glancing around in all directions. They asked her what was in the suitcase, and she replied that it was her father's surgical equipment and that she needed to transport it to the hospital immediately because she was very sick and he was going to perform emergency surgery on her. During the time she was away from her residence, she scattered the bags containing the body parts in 2 different parts of the city. Upon returning home, she changed the locks on the doors and informed the residential security guard that she was going on a trip with her husband. On November 6, 2014, Mexico City police found a human torso without upper limbs. In the afternoon, they had found other human remains, including arms and legs without hands or feet, in black plastic bags. The distance between the first and second discovery sites was considerable, explaining why Maria Alejandra took so long to return to the condominium that early morning. The remains were transferred to the Institute of Forensic Sciences, where anthropologist specialists determined that they belonged to a single person, but they were unable to identify the individual at that time. To distract Alan's relatives and prevent them from notifying the police, Maria Alejandra used her husband's mobile phone to send greetings and respond to all received messages. She temporarily succeeded in ensuring that no one suspected his tragic end, buying herself time to organize a plan to appear guilt-free, just as she had done when she attacked her first husband. Alan's siblings and daughter received WhatsApp messages in which he supposedly commented that he regretted getting married and announced that he had recently started a relationship with another woman. Other contradictory messages stated that he liked being alone, and some said he was traveling. At the same time, Alberto, Maria Alejandra's father, began calling Alan's father to inquire if they knew the whereabouts of his daughter, whom he had been searching for days without any news. Later, he called Alan's parents again to inform them that he had found Maria Alejandra and that she was admitted to the National Institute of Psychiatry, seeking treatment for depression caused by Alan's supposed infidelity. He also mentioned that she had become paranoid, thinking that the police were after her, which was another reason for her hospitalization. In the midst of this web of deception, months passed. But when December came with its special connotation of family unity, Alan's relatives decided to go to his house to see him. Once again, Maria Alejandra was a step ahead. She notified them that they would not be at the location, as they had decided to take a vacation. This story did not make sense to them at all, especially after Alberto's call confirming that she was in the city and undergoing psychiatric treatment. So when the alarmed family went to the police and filed a missing person report for Alan, it only took a few days for the authorities to notice that the report matched the recently found remains. The prosecutors cross-referenced information with staff from the Center for Missing and Absent Persons. These conversations helped them progress in achieving a full identification of the victim. They compared the characteristics of the human remains with the reports of missing persons with similar physical traits. Finally, Alan's body was identified by his relatives. The officers then decided to inspect the couple's house, and upon arrival, they found Maria Alejandra. The detectives immediately took her to the police station and secured a search warrant. Once obtained, they searched the house for evidence and finally found Alan's head, feet, and hands, as well as an electric saw. The investigators found blood traces in one of the rooms and in the bathroom using luminal tests. They also noticed that the surface of the mattress and a piece of the carpet had been cut out to erase evidence of fluids. It was later determined that Maria Alejandra had used these items to support Alan's body parts. Initially, she was questioned as a witness but fell into constant and obvious contradictions, becoming the main person of interest in the case. The investigation soon determined that she was the one sending messages from her husband's cell phone to make his family believe he was alive and not report his disappearance. Maria Alejandra claimed she knew nothing about Alan, that she had not seen him for several days, and that they barely communicated through text messages. Taking advantage of her background as a psychologist and trying to prove her innocence, she showed an admission form to a psychiatric clinic dated during the days when her husband disappeared. Initially, Maria Alejandra denied all responsibility, but Alan's body spoke for itself, and the forensic experts were able to perfectly reconstruct the events. From their analysis, the experts noted in the autopsy protocol that a wound was visible on the torso, caused by a sharp instrument that had penetrated the abdomen and was classified as lethal. With all the evidence that the authorities gathered at the couple's house, as well as at the sites where they found his remains, the investigators were able to establish Maria Alejandra's connection to her husband's cruel death. The detectives had testimonies placing her at the scene at the time of the events, and this was supported by the building's security log, which detailed the specific time she left and entered, plus the issue of the heavy suitcase that they helped her load into her vehicle. In addition, statements from Alan's daughter and sister revealed that the psychologist had threatened the young girl with taking her life if she opposed the relationship with her father. Although Maria Alejandra attempted to evade responsibility by admitting herself to a psychiatric center, forensic studies confirmed that she did not suffer from any mental illness. Finally cornered by the evidence, Maria Alejandra confessed to the fatal assault against her husband and admitted that she took him by surprise. However, she justified her actions by stating she was tired of the domestic violence she was experiencing. On December 10, 2014, the court issued a formal prison order for Maria Alejandra for the crime of homicide. From that moment on, information began to emerge that could implicate the woman in other fatal violent events. For instance, it was said that Maria Alejandra might have committed another serious crime against people in 2012. All this leads to suspicions that the accused might have had help from her father, who would be an accomplice in covering for her and diverting public opinion. Over the years, he allegedly stripped the man of some of his assets, according to Mexican media. Thus, there are suspicions that, in reality, the La Fuente father and daughter were highly dangerous criminals. However, justice did not establish any decisive line of investigation in this regard. After an 8-year wait, on Monday, September 5, 2022, the General Prosecutor's Office of the Capital announced the sentence. For the crimes of qualified homicide and disrespect to corpses or human remains, Maria Alejandra La Fuente Casco was sentenced to 46 years and 6 months in prison, an unprecedented punishment in modern Mexican justice. After the firm conviction, she has no right to review the sentence or to alternative measures that relieve the prison sentence. She was also ordered to pay for the damage and funeral costs, and she lost her political rights. Maria Alejandra La Fuente was a calculating woman who seems to have taken advantage of her father's influence and protection to act freely and proceed against the men who, in some way, tried to save her from punishment for the assault she committed against her first husband, using an argument that portrayed her as a mistreated lady, probably making use of her great manipulation skills. Then, just 3 years later, she acted again, this time against her second husband. Acting with incredible cold blood, she planned the bloody end and even feigned insanity to once again avoid being held responsible for her actions. But this time, she had gone too far. Nothing could save her from being harshly sentenced by justice. Blake Leibel was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada on May 8th. His family was a well-off family right up the tree. His father, Lorne Leibel, is a well-known real estate tycoon and Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer, while Blake's mother, Eleanor Chaitel, inherited Alrose products from her father, Paul Chaitel. This company makes plastic polytart materials and is reported to generate over $28 million US dollars in sales annually. But while grandfather Paul Chaitel was a success, it was reported that he was known to be a control freak and bully. Paul's wife, Blake's grandmother, suffered from a severe mental illness of some kind. The specific diagnosis remains unknown, but what is known is that when Paul Chaitel passed away, he left a will behind that withheld inheritance from his family, pending not only alcohol and drug screening but also an HIV test. Once relatives successfully passed these stipulations, Paul Chaitel's girlfriend would get 2 Mercedes-Benz cars, a Cadillac, and some other parting gifts, while Blake's mother got a payout of $12 million. Oddly enough, Blake's brother, Cody Leibel, was cut out of the will, with Paul Chaitel stating that it wasn't out of lack of love but rather that he knew Cody's father would adequately provide for him. On the other side of the family, Blake and Cody's father, Lorne Leibel, was a man who dated beautiful young women and took them out in fancy Ferraris. He was the envy of any man who set eyes on his fortunes or female companions. When Lorne Leibel split up with Eleanor Chaitel, Blake lived with his mom, while Cody lived with his dad. It was during this time that Blake and his father reportedly became distant and estranged, as Blake felt that Lorne wasn't providing enough for him financially. Even so, the Leibel family was, by all accounts, a highly successful one. Even Blake's grandfather, Stanley Leibel, was a well-known sailor who competed in the 1968 Summer Olympics and later developed hundreds of homes across Toronto. Even Blake's aunt, Terry Leibel, is a Canadian journalist who served as a host for CBC's Olympic coverage during the 1996, 2002, 2004, and 2006 games. Blake and his brother Cody Leibel were destined for success right from the very start, or at least they certainly had the financial environment around them to allow them to succeed at whatever they put their minds to. As a matter of fact, when Cody Leibel moved to California, he certainly left his mark of success on the world. He even sold his 5,500 square foot home in Beverly Crest for almost $18 million in 2017. The buyer was reportedly Katy Perry. Then, later the same year, Cody bought Reba McEntire's house for a reported $25 million, crowning him the youngest homeowner in Beverly Park history. This move made him neighbors with big names like Sylvester Stallone, Mark Wahlberg, Denzel Washington, and Eddie Murphy. As the world's youngest owner of a Ferrari Enzo, Cody not only owned a record label but was a regular at a poker club called Molly's Game, which reportedly hosted famous faces like Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and Tobey Maguire. Cody Leibel certainly seemed as successful as the family that raised him. Cody's brother, Blake Leibel, moved to California in 2004. He reportedly still received an allowance from his mother that totaled close to $2 million in just 8 years. In 2011, Blake's mother, Eleanor, would die of brain cancer, leaving a huge inheritance behind to Blake and Cody. Roughly 2 years later, Blake challenged his mother's will to remove his father as trustee and deny his brother, Cody, his inheritance. But Blake, who reportedly didn't even attend his mother's funeral, received little sympathy from the courts. But who is Blake Leibel? He wrote and directed a comedy film in 2009 called Bold. It was very low budget and it didn't hit well at all. The movie was a massive flop with a 2.6-star rating on IMDb, but apparently you can still find it on Plex TV if you're curious. Blake Leibel also directed a 2013 film called Soulmates. He's even listed as a creative consultant and director on a few episodes of Mel Brooks' Spaceballs, the animated series. In 2010, Blake published a graphic novel called Syndrome. The novel was about a man named Dr. Chaytel, who happens to share the same name as Blake's own mother. In the novel, Dr. Chaytel studies serial killers. He also goes as far as to recruit a town full of actors and then set up a fake Truman Show-style scenario. Next, he fakes the execution of a serial killer before wiping his mind and allowing the memoryless man to run free in the fake town so Chaytel can monitor his actions. The doctor's goal in the book is to cure serial killers. Chetel's character can be quoted saying, "Evil is not some mysterious force. Evil is a syndrome." Co-author of the book, Ryan Roberts, stated that Blake told him he had done a lot of research on serial killers. Ryan also recalled how Leibel jerked his hands upward when showing how a victim could be flipped upside down to drain them of fluid. In hindsight, Ryan Roberts said he'll never forget that. While Blake didn't actually write or illustrate the final edition of Syndrome, he was credited as the creator of the book, and he wrote an introduction at the start of the novel, asking the question, "If you loved hurting things, what would you do?" Syndrome, Blake's biggest success, ended up with him giving away stacks of the graphic novels for free at Comic-Con in San Diego. A producer said Blake wanted to be a respected comic book artist, and he used his cash to try and buy that image. He tried hard to come across as cool and edgy, but it was clear to everyone that Blake Leibel had some serious mental issues that he needed to address. His mental state had begun to deteriorate, and he was spiraling into a dark abyss. Those close to him had started to recognize the signs, but none could foresee the depths to which Blake would ultimately sink, until it was beyond anyone's reach to save him. Blake Leibel had quite the romantic life. In 2006, Blake met a Californian model named Amanda Braun. Amanda was previously in a relationship with Andrew Alczyk, who died in prison following convictions for crimes committed as a crooked hedge fund manager. After 5 years of dating, Blake and Amanda finally tied the knot in 2011. Not long after the wedding, Amanda Braun Leibel gave birth to a son. While the couple appeared to live comfortably in their Beverly Hills mansion, Blake continued to cash in and spend his checks pretty much as quickly as he received them. He reportedly smoked weed constantly and came up with various plans for success, but none of his ideas proved fruitful. During this time, one of Leibel's friends said, Blake was developing a dark obsession with brutal violence. It was like Blake was becoming a different person. He was distant and paranoid. Then, in the summer of 2015, Blake left Amanda while she was pregnant with their second child. This was reportedly due to his pot-smoking habit consuming his life, but I'd say there was more than a marijuana issue brewing. Blake began isolating from almost everyone as he sank deeper into a world filled with gore, violence, and darkness. He even stopped returning his family's calls and began to suspect that his brother Cody was in deep debt to some Russian gang members, and he was worried it could potentially bring harm his way. But there was never any evidence that Cody Leibel owed any major debt like that, and no one could understand why Blake's sanity was spiraling out of control. Most of his friends claimed it was initially the death of his mother that brought on this dark madness. Eleanor Chetel's $5,500,000 home in Toronto plus the millions of other dollars acquired due to her death, just wasn't enough for Blake. He was broke, and when he failed to have his mother's will overturned in 2013, he turned to his father to help him pay for his mounting credit card debts. Then, Blake was sued by his lawyers for non-payment in the unsuccessful case of Eleanor Chettle's will. After Blake split up with Amanda, he began pitching another original script called Psychopomp. It was about a caped vigilante who cuts off the heads of villains and then uploads his antics to YouTube. But reviewers of the script stated that it was terrible in every way possible. There wasn't one thing about Blake Libel's new project that anyone liked. It was likened to a bad rip-off version of Batman, where Batman is violent, psychotic, stupid, sadistic, and highly unlikable. Psychopomp was nothing more than a gratuitously violent film, devoid of any imaginative flair. However, there were whispers that Hilary Shore, a producer involved in Children of Men, had expressed interest in the Psychopomp screenplay, yet this supposed development never materialized. While married to a pregnant Amanda Braun, Blake had started seeing Iana Kashin, a stunning 30-year-old Ukrainian former attorney from Kiev. In no time, Blake got her pregnant too, and for a while, they seemed happy and healthy as Blake pulled Iana into his fantasy world of Hollywood hot pink. All the while, his mental decline was picking up speed at a volatile pace. In May 2016, Iana gave birth to a baby girl named Diana, and to outside observers, the new family appeared to be doing well. However, the reality was far from idyllic. Blake harbored intense jealousy toward the infant as a storm of anger raged within him. No longer the sole object of Iana's affection, Blake found himself replaced by baby Diana, pushing him to new heights of psychological instability. He incessantly demanded sexual attention from Iana, threatening to abandon her for another woman if she refused his advances. In an attempt to salvage their relationship, Iana sent her newborn daughter to live with her mother in a nearby apartment, which Blake financially supported. Then, on May 20th, Blake Libel was arrested for sexual assault not far from his condo. The alleged victim was Blake's third girlfriend, Constance. She'd been living in another house he owned, a couple of miles away from his West Hollywood apartment where he lived with Iana. Constance claimed Blake forced himself on her in the house. Buka Fury, known for being a storyboard artist on Aquaman and working in the art department for films like Snow White and the Huntsman, P.S. I Love You and the Emoji Movie, was among those who later commented on the case. Blake Libel was released from custody around 15 hours after he was arrested following a bail payment of $100,000. Iana had bailed Blake out of jail, but finding out about the affair with Constance was the final straw for her. She moved into her mother, Olga Kazian's, apartment. When Iana stopped responding to messages, her mother called the police for a welfare check. Officers arrived at Blake Libel's apartment on May 26, 2016. They knocked, and after several attempts, Blake finally opened the door. He was wearing only boxer shorts and had visible scratches on his face. The officers asked where Iana was, and Blake claimed she had gone to the hospital. Suspicious, they entered the apartment. There was only one door left to check, and it was locked. The cops tried to force the door open to the bedroom, but a mattress was barricading the door from the other side. The cops shouted for whoever was in there to come out. And that's when Blake's voice finally responded, saying he wasn't going to come out because he was scared that the officers were going to beat him up. They assured him that this wouldn't happen and that they were just there to check on his girlfriend to make sure she was okay. Blake replied back that she was fine. He said she was at the hospital and gave them a room number. He also said that his father would be there soon and that he wasn't coming out until then. Blake was referring to his accountant and mentor, Stephen Green. Blake had called Stephen around noon and asked him to come to the apartment. For a month before Stephen Green received that call, he had been unable to get in contact with Blake Libel. Green had called, messaged, left voicemails, and even emailed Blake several times, but he never got a reply. Stephen Green even left a voicemail on Blake's phone stating that he was worried about him and that he loved him. He said, whatever was going on, he wanted to help him get through it. But as you're about to find out, it was way too late for that. When Green arrived at the condo, he spoke to Blake through the partially open bedroom door in the apartment. A short while later, A detective arrived on the scene to find Green now in the living room talking to Blake on the phone. Leibel was still barricaded in the master bedroom. When Green hung up the phone, the detective asked him to call Blake back, which he did. After a few minutes of conversation, Blake Leibel finally agreed to come out. He was only wearing boxer shorts when he emerged from the room. Stephen Green gave Blake some clothing to put on. Luckily, officers checked the clothing first and found Leibel's passport and about $4,000 in cash. It's thought that he was going to try and make a break for it, but that never happened. As the officers entered the bedroom, one of them screamed, "She's on the bed." The detective immediately ordered everyone to go outside, and he called in the paramedics who were waiting on standby. Sadly, Yana Cashin was pronounced dead at 1:02 p.m. on May 26th. Yana Cashin's naked body was lying on a clean sheet and was covered by a red Mickey Mouse blanket on top of a blue polka dot blanket. Her head was on a pillow. There were abrasions and bruising on the left side of Cashin's face, consistent with blunt force trauma. There were human bite marks on Cashin's left jaw and left bicep, as well as fingernail marks under her jawline. Her scalp had been removed from around her eyebrows to the hairline on the back of her head. A large portion of skin on the right side of her face had also been removed. The skull bone was visible. There were cuts across her lower forehead below the eyebrows. There was also a cut on the right side of her face from her cheek to her jawline, and another on the left side of her face toward where the ear should have been, but it was missing. The medical examiner later proposed that a sharp-bladed tool had been used to cut off the skin, but he also noted that some facial tissue had been ripped away by hand. Considering the extensive damage to Yana's face and skull, combined with the challenging nature of both cutting and tearing the tissue, the doctor believed that inflicting these injuries would have been a lengthy process. Moreover, the presence of inflammation in the tissue and bleeding from several severed samples led to the tragic conclusion that Yana Cashin was still alive while enduring this prolonged torture. The examiner also determined that there was no blood in Yana's heart, veins, or arteries. Half of Yana's blood supply was missing. This is highly unusual, even considering the weight of her injuries. Gravity wouldn't have been enough to drain that much blood from her body. Her heart would have had to have been pumping the entire time. It was the medical examiner's opinion that Blake may have drained Yana's blood by placing her in the bathtub with her head lower than her feet and then running water over her head, which could have increased the blood flow and potentially interfered with clotting. Due to the presence of foam in her nostrils, the doctor concluded that Yana was probably submerged in water for at least 30 minutes. Her body was then washed and placed on the clean sheet. Her cause of death was ruled as exsanguination, the draining of blood. There was an additional pillow to the left of Yana with an indentation on it. It was as if someone had been lying next to her. There were dried bloodstains on the mattress beneath the sheet she lay upon. The investigation uncovered the extent of the violence that had occurred throughout Blake Leibel's condo. According to court documents, bloodstains and pieces of human flesh were discovered behind the bed. Blood was splattered on the wall near Yana's body. A fragment of an eyebrow was found on the floor beside the bed. Bloodstains were present on another mattress from a second bed in the room, as well as on a side table and in various other areas of the bedroom. The mattress that had been used to obstruct the door belonged to the second bed. A clump of hair and a blood-stained razor were found in the trash can. When cops entered the bathroom of the master bedroom, warm water was running in the bathtub. Bloodstains and hair could be seen in the tub. A green paring knife with blood on it was found in the top drawer in the bathroom. The oval shape of the bloodstains found on the headboard of the bed and the guest bedroom were consistent with having been made via the top of Yana's scalped head. There was blood on 2 towels, a pillowcase, the floor, and the base of the drapes in the guest bedroom. The drain in the tub of the guest bathroom also tested positive for blood. The same drain contained some freshly cut hair. Chemical testing also confirmed the presence of blood that someone had tried to clean up in areas of the dining room, the hallway, the guest bathroom, and both of the bedrooms. The kitchen garbage disposal also tested positive for blood. Then, more evidence was found in the dumpster. Inside trash bags that had been thrown down the garbage chute, mere feet from Blake's condo door, investigators found blood-stained bedding, towels, clothing, bath mats, placemats. a bed skirt with bloody handprints, human tissue including some pieces with hair that appeared to be scalp, the missing ear. Samples taken from Blake's hand and fingernails also contained Iyanna's DNA. Iyanna's hands showed signs of injury consistent with self-defense. The marks and bruises seen on Blake's face when arrested were most likely inflicted by Iyanna fighting for her life. The LA coroner concluded that she was kept alive for around 8 hours. He said he'd never seen injuries like that and likened them to wartime injuries. Blake Leibel was arrested and charged with the torture and murder of Iyanna Cashin. It was later discovered that he used her phone to order food to the apartment via Postmates twice during the time Iyanna was missing. Blake's demeanor on the scene was described as ice cold. He acted as if he didn't even know Iyanna was dead. When an officer told him, he simply replied, "Well, I guess you'll find out who did it then." Leibel donned an evil grin as officers led him away from the condo in handcuffs. On June 26, 2018, Blake Leibel was sentenced to life without parole. Due to the nature of his crimes, he was eligible for the death penalty, but the DA didn't pursue it, even though doctors deemed Blake not to be insane and stated he was fit to stand trial. It took the jury just 3 hours to deliver a guilty verdict. Blake was also ordered to pay about $43 million to Iyanna Cashin's family. Cody Leibel was present every day of the trial. Blake's father never showed up. Iyanna Cashin had only been living in the United States for a couple of years before tragedy struck. She was working on becoming a translator. What happened to her was absolutely devastating. It was a crime with little motive outside of Blake's narcissistic desire to control women with his allowance. It was as if this aged, evil little boy had never been rejected. And once he was, or rather felt like he couldn't take it. His ego collapsed, and he snatched away the life of his newborn daughter's beautiful mother in the cruelest way possible. Blake Leibel will rot in prison where he belongs, alone, with no one, nothing, and no future that will lead to any shedding of light in his direction. Sydney Luff was born on August 21, 1993, in a small Nebraska town called Broken Bow. In February, her family moved to the city of Nilia in search of other opportunities. From a young age, Sydney was known to be very good at fishing, which she loved. She also played volleyball and other sports at school, but unfortunately had to give them up due to developing scoliosis during her adolescence, a condition that affects the spine and causes an abnormal curvature to the sides, greatly increasing the risk of injuries during physical exertion. After finishing her high school studies in 2011, Sydney got a job at a hardware store and was able to move into a small apartment 3 hours away from her parents' home. According to her family, Sydney suffered from anxiety and had been struggling with severe depression. They were aware of this because, just a few days before her disappearance, Sydney had opened up about it, leading her parents to help her get an appointment with a doctor and even taking her to the consultation to be prescribed antidepressants in hopes of improving her situation. Unfortunately, that day would be the last time her parents saw her alive. As the investigation progressed in search of useful information, the police contacted friends and acquaintances of the missing young woman for clues about her possible whereabouts. Thanks to a friend of Sydney, they learned that the girl had met a young woman named Audrey on the Tinder app, who had agreed to a date on November 1437. For that date, Sydney had asked if it would just be the two of them, to which Audrey affirmatively replied. The date between the two women was to take place in the basement of an apartment that Audrey had rented. Strangely, it seemed to go well, as that night Sydney returned to her apartment, and they planned another date for the next day. There were several pieces of evidence for this, as Sydney had even posted a photo on her Snapchat on November 15th with the caption "Ready for my date?" along with a heart emoji. Until that moment, this was the only information the police had about Sydney. She had taken the precaution of informing her friends that she was going out with an unknown person from Tinder whom she had been talking to for some time. Among these friends was a girl named Brooklyn McChrystal, who, upon learning of Sydney's disappearance, set out to gather information about the person her friend had gone out with to hand over to the police. For this, she decided to create a Tinder account and began searching through profiles in the area until she finally found one of a girl, also named Audrey, like the person who had gone out with Sydney. Brooklyn proceeded to like this profile and thus managed to make a match with this supposed Audrey, and they both started messaging until Brooklyn finally got Audrey to share her phone number. Once she had the number, Sydney's friend gave all the information to the police so they could start tracking the number and thus find the location of the suspect. This plan seemed unlikely to work, as many things could go wrong, but 2 days later, the authorities made a terrifying discovery. It turns out that when tracking Sydney's last phone movements before it lost signal, it was found in the same location as the phone number given by Sydney's friend. This left the officers no choice but to head to that location, leading them to the city of Wilbur, also in Nebraska, to a duplex apartment. On one side lived the owner, and on the other, a couple of tenants who immediately caught the officers' attention. The person renting the apartment was a 51-year-old man named Aubrey Trail, and his name was suspiciously similar to Audrey from Tinder, and the girl in these photos could perfectly be this man's girlfriend, a 23-year-old girl named Bailey Boswell. Despite all this, the police did not consider this couple as direct suspects, and for them, the possibility that Sydney was still alive was very high. For this reason, the visit they made to Aubrey and Bailey was routine and to leave no stone unturned. Upon arriving at the apartment and after knocking on the door several times, no one came out to greet them, so the officers asked the owner of the complex for help, who handed over the key, and they were able to confirm that there was no one at home. The only thing that caught the police's attention was that a penetrating smell of chlorine was coming out of this apartment, impregnating the entire place. The owner even told them that he had noticed this a day ago, and that because of that intense smell, a family member of the owner had vomited and developed a rash due to the potent chemical. He also mentioned that, strangely, he had noticed that Aubrey Trail and his girlfriend had the air conditioning still running despite it being November and temperatures being very low in Nebraska at that time of the year. The next day, the police returned to the apartment, but this time they were more prepared and armed with a search warrant to enter and inspect the entire place thoroughly. However, they found nothing. Everything seemed the same as the day before. The couple was still without any signs of having returned home, and the same chlorine smell continued to emanate from the basement. But there was nothing else that caught their attention at first glance, so they left the place and focused on continuing to search for the missing young woman in the surroundings of the city. 2 weeks later, and still with no news of Sydney, her disappearance became more popular in the media, and in the absence of new evidence indicating another path to follow in the case, the police issued a public statement classifying Aubrey Trail and his girlfriend as persons of interest and possible suspects. In response to the statement, the man and his partner made a live broadcast on Facebook defending themselves against the police accusations and claiming they were both innocent. At the end of the broadcast, it can even be heard Aubrey saying, "I pray for Sydney to appear soon." 2 days later, the police arrested Trail and Bailey in a hotel in Missouri, although this was for charges not related to Sydney's case. It turns out that the two earned their living by scamming antique stores and private businesses, defrauding people they also scammed. At the time of their arrest, according to police statements, the couple possessed maps, sleeping bags, and sports shoes, which appeared to be part of their tools for their plan to escape to Mexico. After this arrest for fraud, the police found an excuse to interrogate the two suspects about Sydney's case. At first, they did not say much, but Bailey confessed to being the owner of the Tinder profile identified as Audrey and confirmed that she had met with the girl on both occasions. According to her, the last time she saw Sydney was on November 15th after taking a ride in her own car while smoking marijuana, and then they left Sydney at a friend's house. After that, they did not exchange a single message. When the police asked where the friend's house was located, the young woman said she did not remember the exact location. She responded with monosyllables and refused to give any personal information about herself. Aubrey Trail also refused to make any statements during his arrest for fraud and the subsequent interrogation. After this, the FBI decided to get involved in the investigation of Sydney's disappearance. Bailey Boswell never had a father figure, as her father was absent when she was just a girl. Bailey was good at sports, so much so that in high school, she was the first on the list of the fastest runners, and for this she was even once offered a scholarship to play basketball at the university. But all this promising future was ruined when she started having problems with substance abuse after graduation. Shortly after, she had a daughter and married a man named Freddie Pinnell. Those who knew the dynamics of this couple describe it with terror, as this man was very aggressive, both physically and psychologically with Bailey, and he had such an extreme drug addiction that, Combined with his violent attitude, social service authorities were forced to take their daughter from their home when she was still in her early school years. According to Bailey's mother, at one point, this man even hit and kicked her in the face while she was still pregnant. On the other hand, although it was hard to believe, Aubrey Trail had an even more complicated life than his partner. As a child, his parents were abusive to him in all possible ways, and Aubrey said he felt as if their greatest wish was for him to disappear. These mistreatments continued until his grandfather took over his upbringing. Sometime later, while still very young, Aubrey was forced to return to his childhood home, where he would again suffer abuse from his stepfather. Growing up in poverty, he had to move through various foster homes until, as a teenager, he ended up in prison after being convicted of armed robbery. Upon his release, he began looking for different ways to make a living, avoiding traditional employment. Scams became a part of Aubrey's daily life. He primarily defrauded antique shops by selling them fake objects purported to be ancient, and he also got involved in thefts whenever the opportunity arose among other illegal activities. This was Aubrey's lifestyle when one day while browsing a website, which was a classifieds page where implicitly many people sold their bodies, he contacted Bailey Boswell. Aubrey was on this page looking to connect with a female, and Bailey was supposedly there looking for a sugar daddy. This is how these two, with a 28-age difference between them, began their relationship and moved in together to the apartment Aubrey had rented in the city of Wilbur. As the FBI gathered all this information about the suspect's past, while they remained under arrest for their fraud schemes, and during the interrogation process, neither was willing to provide additional information about the possible whereabouts of Sydney. They maintained their innocence regarding any crime related to her. But this would change when a very chilling discovery was made. On December 4, 2017, a search team from the local police department, led by the FBI, found parts of Sydney's body discarded in trash bags on a dirt road north of Nebraska, approximately an hour's drive from the city of Wilbur, where the two suspects lived. Along with Sydney's body, adult toys and artifacts were found, discarded using the same bags in which the young woman's body was wrapped. It was confirmed that the date of death was almost a month prior, and although they could not be precisely sure, forensic studies estimated that her death occurred around the dates Bailey organized the dates with the girl. They also stated that the body had bruises all over. Upon the discovery of Sydney's body and the emergence of this evidence, both suspects began to talk, or at least Aubrey did, as Bailey seemed to be in shock during all subsequent interrogations and cried while declaring her innocence of the crime, although she was not willing to implicate Aubrey or declare that he had planned the crime. On the other hand, Trail would give various versions and statements that would vary both in the interrogations conducted after the body was found and throughout the judicial process he would face in the coming months. This was further proof to finally classify him psychologically as a pathological liar, that is, a person who lies compulsively. Initially, after being placed in pretrial detention due to evidence suggesting he might try to escape to Mexico, Aubrey confessed that he had killed Sydney on his own and without Bailey's help. In the same statement, the man requested that the law of retaliation be applied. Indeed, he exclaimed that he should be executed for the murder of Sydney Luff. However, as warrior-like and archaic as this sounded, Aubrey did not stick to his statement and later said that Sydney died after a third date they had, where the three of them were engaged in a threesome. Each one, consensually of course, was fulfilling their fantasies until it came to a point where, again consensually, Sydney's neck had to be tightened a bit. At that moment, Aubrey went too far and the young woman ended up dying from asphyxiation. At some point in this whole snowball of lies created by Aubrey, he began to tell the FBI agents something that wasn't entirely a lie because there was evidence that he did something similar, but not exactly as he told it. This was that he practically dedicated himself to uploading videos on the dark web, and these videos were of him, Bailey, and another girl. In this case, it was believed that Sydney participated in this as he made them believe, and that these videos were quite perverse, in which clients with strange fetishes paid him to perform all these bizarre acts. Aubrey also said that he used the money he received from these videos to pay different young women to participate and help him make them. He claimed that they were aware that there were practices or fetishes that could result in injuries or even death. He even went so far as to say that Sydney had consented to participate as part of the deal and that he had a video of her consenting to this. But obviously, as this was most likely a lie, Such a video could never be seen by any of the authorities to be taken as verifiable evidence. Although Aubrey lied a lot in his statements and often contradicted himself, the authorities had to be attentive to anything that came out of his mouth since he occasionally told the truth, at least partially. For example, in one of his statements he gave them a clue as to where they could find Sydney's phone, which was in the cemetery of Wilbur. When they went there, the police indeed found the girl's phone, along with her driver's license and credit cards. In 2018, the trial that would decide the fate of the two accused began. On June 11 of that year, the court announced that both Aubrey Trail and his girlfriend Bailey Boswell would face charges of first-degree murder and improper disposal of human remains. The prosecution expressed its plan to seek the death penalty for both due to the gruesomeness of the crime and because at the final moment of the trial, both defendants decided to plead not guilty. This was likely because their lawyers had a very distorted view of reality and sold their clients the idea that they could go free. During the trial, 3 women who had been involved with the couple testified. Thanks to this, very interesting details were revealed, such as that Aubrey had told them he was a kind of vampire who could read minds and obtain his powers by performing perverted rituals, while also claiming that he could gain more of these powers if he ever managed to kill a woman as part of these rites. One of these women also testified that when she stopped participating in meetings with the couple, Aubrey threatened her saying he would kill her entire family if she revealed the atrocities that were taking place there. The defendants' lies fell apart when the prosecution's evidence conclusively demonstrated that this crime had indeed been premeditated and planned in advance. Some housekeepers from a nearby motel testified that they had seen Sydney with Bailey and Aubrey at the hotel weeks before the young woman's disappearance. Security cameras from another hotel near Sydney's workplace showed Bailey and Aubrey lurking around the area. On November 15th at around 11 a.m., the couple was seen buying a folding saw and food grinders at a local mall. The prosecution also presented phone tower records indicating that both had been waiting near Sydney's residence in the hours before she went to work on November 15th. Apparently, they followed her to her workplace, where another security camera recorded Aubrey entering the hardware store in the afternoon, minutes before Sydney's shift ended, frequently glancing over his shoulder as if monitoring her. There were also security recordings showing Trail purchasing a large saw for wood, large-sized trash bags, and several lighters of bleach at a store. Although many searches were conducted, the saws that Trail supposedly used were never found. They also couldn't find traces of Sydney's DNA on the adult toys that were analyzed and found at the scene where her body was located. This is presumed to be due to the thorough cleaning with bleach that the man had carried out in the entire apartment. However, the FBI found traces of blood and Sydney's DNA on a pair of rubber gloves on a pair of pants belonging to Aubrey. The same was found on an electrical cord that appeared to be the final cause of death for the 24-year-old woman. Following this, there was not much to be done. Aubrey's defense attorneys had attempted to portray the crime as a perverted threesome gone wrong, but with all the compelling evidence against this idea, it was abandoned. Bailey's defense, on the other hand, had a bit more success. They focused on her troubled adolescence and argued that her role in Sydney's death had been almost forced after being emotionally manipulated by Aubrey, who was twice her age. When the time came for the trial that would determine the final fate of the 52-year-old man, the jury decided that Aubrey Trail would be sentenced to death. This was for charges of first-degree murder and many more such as conspiracy. Trail's defense attempted to appeal the verdict, but the judge denied this request. Meanwhile, Bailey's defense asked for her final sentence to be postponed for later. In October 2020, a jury sentenced her to life imprisonment for the same charges imposed on Aubrey. Bailey was not given the death penalty because the court considered the circumstances of her young age and the emotional manipulation by Trail in committing these acts. Today, Bailey is incarcerated in a women's correctional center in Nebraska, and Aubrey is on death row, awaiting the fulfillment of his sentence in the coming years. At some point during the trial, specifically when the prosecution began seeking the death penalty for Bailey, Aubrey became very upset because he wanted all the blame to fall on him and not on his partner. At that moment, he caused a scandal in the courtroom. After saying that Bailey did not understand and cursing everyone in the court, he suddenly pulled out a razor blade. It's unclear where he got it from as he was in court and attempted to harm himself in an area where he obviously intended to do the most damage. However, he did not die from this act, dispelling any notion that he was a vampire or had any special powers. On the morning of May 25, 2013, Marshall University was celebrating the graduation of a new cadre of professionals. Mark and Joanna McDermott were supposed to be among the parents witnessing their children receive their diplomas. However, their day took an unexpected turn. This is the of Mark McDermott, a model family man who faced betrayal by someone he considered and raised as his own son for nearly 20 years. Mark McDermott was born in the early 1960s in Australia. Little is known about his upbringing and personal life. What is known is that Mark was the eldest of 5 siblings. His father, Bruce McDermott, as well as 2 younger sisters, Tracy and Nicole, with Nicole being the youngest, are his only known relatives. Close acquaintances have described Mark as not only a successful businessman, but also a kind and responsive individual. Nicole portrayed her older brother as a wonderful person who could never deliberately cause harm to anyone. Very little information is available about Mark's life, including his adult years. At some point, Mark traveled to the southern United States. The circumstances and reasons for this journey remain unknown. It was during this time in the U.S. that he met Joanna Dunn, a single mother with a 4-year-old child. Even less information exists about Joanna's life. Most accounts come from her own narratives. However, the words she shared publicly were almost entirely dedicated to her son, who is also central to this story, Donald Wayne Dunn. Donald Wayne Dunn was born in the early 1990s in West Virginia, where he lived his entire life with his mother's family. His grandparents played a significant role in his upbringing since they cared for him most of the time. The reason Joanna, a working single mother, entrusted much of Donald's upbringing to her parents was that she found it challenging to raise a child alone. Even when they managed to spend time together, Joanna often turned to video games and television to entertain Donald. On the rare days they were home together, it was challenging for her to give him all her attention. However, everything changed with Mark's entry into their lives. The couple quickly started a relationship and soon got married. Joanna adopted her husband's last name, and all 3 moved to West Virginia, becoming a very close-knit family from the beginning. Mark and Donald developed a close relationship as if they were truly related by blood. Some who knew them, including Mark's sisters and father, confidently stated that Mark treated the boy as his own son, and Donald regarded him as his only father. Their strong bond was evident. When Donald was still a minor, Mark and Joanna's relationship went through a difficult period that ended in a temporary separation. Despite Mark living alone for some time, Donald insisted on residing with him rather than his mother. During those months, the family faced another challenging period when Joanna was diagnosed with cancer. However, by supporting each other, they managed to get through these tough times. Mark always ensured that his stepson had a comfortable life without any deprivation. He made sure Donald never lacked anything he needed. Although Donald was a simple person who never asked for much, he seemed grateful for the peaceful and luxurious life his stepfather provided. In February 2008, when Donald graduated from high school, Mark took on the financial responsibility for his higher education at Rio Noa Community College, where he studied for 2 years. Mark continued to pay for his education even when, in 2010, Donald transferred to Marshall University. Despite living with his girlfriend, with whom he had been in a relationship since he was 15, and her family, he always enjoyed unconditional support from Mark and Joanna. It's noteworthy that their financial assistance wasn't limited to just tuition fees. They also covered expenses for clothing, car insurance, and paid for his living and food expenses. Donald only had to focus on his studies, a responsible and dedicated young man who strictly followed his daily routine and often canceled or declined plans with loved ones due to study commitments or practical work requirements for upcoming exams. During his 5 years of university education, he maintained this lifestyle, aiming to graduate on time without falling behind in any semester. Saturday, May 25, 2013, was to be a significant day for him as he was scheduled to receive his diploma. However, what was meant to be as special for celebration turned into a deeply distressing moment that would forever alter his life. As the McCott family prepared for Donald's graduation ceremony, an emergency call was made to 911 from their home. "What is your name?" "Joanna McDermott. I shot my husband." "Okay. Is he breathing?" "No." "Was it an accident?" "No." We were fighting. You were fighting? Yes. It was supposed to be a happy day. It's his graduation. Your child's graduation? Yes. Is your child okay? Will the police be coming too? Yes. Authorities promptly headed to the McDermott residence. Sergeant Greg Kean of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office was one of the first law enforcement officers to arrive at the scene. Upon arrival, he found Joanna in a state of severe shock. Moving further into the house, he saw Mark lying lifelessly on the couch in the living room. It appeared he had been reading a book at the time of his death. At first glance, Mark had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. When investigators moved the body, they discovered a 3rd wound in the back of his shoulder. The medical examiner at the scene confirmed that although the cause of death was indeed due to head wounds, death was likely not instantaneous. The amount of blood at the scene indicated that Mark's prolonged survival led to significant blood loss. According to initial reports on the incident, Donald had been preparing for his significant day, and noise from the shower drowned out the sound of gunshots. Consequently, he did not realize Joanna had shot his stepfather until he exited the bathroom and found Mark's body in the living room. All right, how old is your husband? My husband is 54. And you were just fighting? Yes. All right. Did you shoot him in the side? No. In the head? In the head. Yes. Okay. Try not to touch anything. My son is in the bathroom. I need to attempt to go downstairs so he can assist me. How old is your son? He is 23. Does he know what has happened? He doesn't know. He's downstairs for his graduation. The pistol was lying on the dining table next to a letter, presumably written by Joanna and addressed to Donald. In it, the distressed woman explained to her son that her marriage had become intolerable and that she could not stay in a relationship with someone she no longer loved. She also apologized for leaving his life without seeing him grow into a man. At that moment, Joanna and Donald were taken in separate cars to the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office, where an officer was to take their statements. Since Joanna called emergency services, the case appeared to be another instance of domestic violence with a tragic conclusion. In her conversation with the operator, Joanna claimed that she and Mark had argued, and in a fit of rage without realizing her actions, she shot him in the head with her pistol. This narrative surprised the officers who took her for questioning, because she then made a confession that completely overturned her initial story, and thus changed the entire course of the investigation. When the doors of the police car closed, Joanna revealed that it was not she who ended Mark's life, but her son Donald. However, this revelation was not all. The story turned out to be far more intricate than what investigators had assumed. Once in the interrogation room, Joanna recounted to Captain James Barr of Raleigh County Sheriff's Office the sequence of events that took place on May 25, 2013. She mentioned that her son's graduation was scheduled for earlier in the day. In the morning, she left home to run some errands and buy groceries. Upon returning home and as she was about to get out of her car, Donald approached her and asked her to close her eyes, follow him into the house. He had a surprise for her. Trusting her son had prepared something special, she blindly followed him into the dining room, where he suggested she sit down. At that moment, Joanna heard a distinctive click. When she finally turned to look at Donald, she found herself face to face with the barrel, her own pistol in his hands. The gun did not fire. Joanna, completely frightened, managed to grab it and wrest it from her son's hands. She overcame her panic, which allowed her to think clearly and devise a plan of action to save herself from becoming Donald's second victim. Seeing Mark's lifeless body, she quickly told Donald that she was going to call emergency services and take the blame for the crime. Although the young man initially seemed to doubt her plan, he eventually agreed. During the interrogation, Joanna explained that she decided to call emergency services to protect herself from her own son. She understood that by confessing to a crime she did not commit, she would end up behind bars. Joanna added that she was sure that if she didn't do this, Donald would try to end her life. She also confessed that in the 23 years she had been his mother, she never thought he would point a gun at her head and pull the trigger. The gun used by Donald belonged to Joanna. She explained that it did not fire, probably because she had pulled the slide back far enough on the semi-automatic weapon, which prevents a normal shot. Captain Barr explained that Joanna's story seemed entirely logical to him because from the first moment he saw Donald, he had a feeling something was off. He noted that considering the severity of the situation, the 23-year-old young man appeared unusually calm and always maintained a neutral facial expression. For this reason, he ordered Donald be placed in a separate interrogation room away from his mother from the beginning of the interrogation. Donald denied any involvement in his stepfather's death. His facade, however, quickly crumbled when he was told of Joanna's statements. James Barr did not need to use any intimidation tactics to get the young man to confess. He didn't pressure him or demand detailed information to piece together the case. Donald voluntarily provided everything. The story that unfolded was almost unbelievable. It all began after Donald's first year of college. He wasn't doing well in his studies and decided to drop out due to poor grades. Initially, his classes were simple. Just showing up at the right room in time was enough for good grades. But as the semester progressed, it required more effort. According to Donald, he felt he didn't have the strength to continue his studies. Instead of telling the truth, he chose to lie to Mark and Joanna. His close relatives were not the only ones deceived. Even his girlfriend and her family were unaware of what was happening. Rachel Rush, his girlfriend's sister, said Donald maintained a routine that made it seem like he was attending classes. He left and returned home at regular times, spending most of his day in his room under the pretense of needing focus for assignments or tests. Donald even went as far as falsifying grade reports. This deception lasted for 4.5 years without anyone suspecting a thing. His family's faith in him remained unwavering as he pretended to be a student. Joanna and Mark had no idea that their son was misusing the money they provided to support him. Donald claimed he never meant to deceive his family for so long. But as days went by, speaking the truth just got harder and harder. The one thing that stopped him from being honest, the fear that Mark and Joanna would stop covering his expenses. Even though he acted like material things, a car and fancy clothes didn't matter much. The reality different. Losing his lifestyle was a big deal for him. Over several months, Donald thought he had the perfect plan to get away everything. From the start, he planned something drastic to take his parents' lives. He wanted to avoid suspicion by leaving a note, something similar to what was found on the dining table with the pistol. Donald believed that when authorities read it, they'd think it was written by a distressed woman, stuck in an unhappy marriage, who saw no other way but to take her husband's life and then her own. On May 25th, Donald told Captain Barr that he secretly took Joanna's pistol and kept it all day while pretending to prepare for his graduation. Part of his plan included creating an alibi by going to the supermarket so surveillance cameras would record him there. However, things didn't go as planned. He didn't expect his mother's gun to jam just as he tried to pull the trigger aimed at her head. The conclusions and plans Donald revealed later baffled everyone who heard them. James Barr shared that Donald even confessed he had practiced the emotions he'd display on his face when authorities arrived at the scene. He also considered how he would finance his life after losing the stable income provided by Mark, and decided to rely on the sympathy of his relatives for as long as. While they supported him, he planned to engage in sports to improve his physical condition. Ultimately, when left with no other options, he intended to enlist in the police or the army. Reflecting on the feasibility of his plan, Donald concluded it would be easier to kill his mother and stepfather than to confess that he had been deceiving them for almost 5 years. According to a legal document from the Supreme Court of West Virginia, published in April 2016, a month after his arrest in June 2013, Donald was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. Even before the trial commenced, Donald and his legal team sought ways to delay proceedings. A few weeks before the scheduled start of hearings, while already in solitary confinement, Donald underwent surgery on his right hand. His lawyers used this surgery as a pretext to request a delay in starting the process, and arguing that during initial sessions, Donald would be under strong painkillers' influence. To decide on this matter, the court first required medical documents of the defendant. Eventually, the request was denied. The court observed that during preliminary hearings, Donald showed no signs of being significantly impaired by painkillers and thus deemed him competent to participate in the trial, approving its continuation. The trial took place in August 2014, more than a year following Mark's tragic death. The jury trial was presided over by Judge John A. Hutchinson, with David White serving as Donald's attorney and Christine Keller representing Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office. Mark's two sisters, accompanied by one niece, traveled over 15,000 kilometers from Australia to witness the trial of someone they had considered family for nearly 20 years. Although detailed information from witness testimonies or evidence presented is not available, and there is a lack of photos and videos, it is known that the defense intended to state in their opening arguments that Donald was under illegal drugs influence at the time of the crime. There is no evidence that this was ever referenced before or confirmed through any toxicological tests. Just a few days after the initial, specifically on August 14, 2014, Donald Dunn was found guilty of the first degree of his stepfather, Mark McDermott. He was also convicted of attempting to murder his mother, Joanna McDermott, and using a firearm in the commission of these crimes. On September 5th of the same year, Judge John Hutchinson sentenced Donald to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for his stepfather's murder and an additional 15 years for attempting to murder his mother. After the sentence was announced, Joanna read an emotional letter she had prepared for the court. In her statement, Donald's mother mentioned that something bad had happened at some point in her son's life, possibly after his grandparents' illness or due to the pressure she applied for him to study at the university. She also suggested that frequent play of violent video games from a young age might have had an impact. Joanna expressed her disapproval of the public image created of her son and made clear her disagreement with the harsh sentence handed down. Judge Hutchinson responded that Joanna's disapproval did not influence his decision. He stated that he believed the sentence imposed was necessary to restore justice in this unjust situation. The judge sympathized with Donald's mother, but maintained that shielding her son from the consequences of his actions could not be justified under these serious circumstances. After the verdict, Mark's sister and father expressed their continuing disbelief at how Donald could take the life of a man who had raised him as his own son for 19 years. Though they acknowledged that Mark would never be brought back by this verdict, they were grateful for the judgment rendered by Judge Hutchinson. The horrible case of Cindy James. Cindy James was born on June 12, 1944, the daughter of Otto and Matilda. Her original name was Cynthia Elizabeth Hack, but she later changed it to Cindy James for reasons that will become apparent. Her father, a retired colonel from the Canadian Air Force, and her mother, housewife, raised Cindy and her 5 siblings in a home known for its kindness, generosity, and friendliness. Cindy, characterized by her special nature and desire to help others, pursued a career in nursing. During this period, her father had re-enlisted with the Air Force and relocated the family to France, where she visited them during holidays. During this time, in letters to her family, Cindy occasionally referred to an unnamed intern she had met during her studies. She claimed that the two had at one point been engaged and that, after finding he had terminal cancer, the man committed suicide while the couple were on a skiing trip. None of her parents or siblings, however, ever met the man, and Cindy did not name him. In the summer of 1965, Cindy met Roy Makepeace, a South African psychiatrist 18 years her senior. The two married on December 9, 1966, the same year she graduated from nursing school. Despite the age difference, their marriage initially seemed harmonious, and they began their life together with Cindy working as a nurse. In 1975, Cindy's career took a significant turn when she became the coordinator of a day center for minors with behavioral issues. Her dedication and passion for her work were evident during her 12-year tenure at the center. Cindy's commitment to the children was deeply appreciated by their parents, who recognized her profound impact and devotion. A pivotal moment in Cindy's life occurred after these 12 years when she decided to seek change. She left her job at the day center and accepted a nursing position at Richmond Hospital. Around the same time, Cindy and Roy's marriage ended in divorce. This marked a complete transformation in Cindy's life. She moved out of the house she shared with Roy, found a new place to live, adopted a pet, and immersed herself in work to stay occupied. This busy new lifestyle was Cindy's way of coping with the changes and challenges following her divorce. It's not clear why she divorced Roy. What has been found is that at least on 2 or 3 occasions, Roy had hit Cindy, so perhaps the reason she divorced was that he mistreated her. Despite this, it is known that Cindy and her ex-husband, Roy, claimed to have divorced on amicable terms, even though he had physically assaulted her several times. They maintained that they still had a good relationship and got along well. However, for months after her divorce and the beginning of her new life, Cindy's nightmare commenced. In October 1982, Cindy began receiving numerous unsettling phone calls at her home. Often, these calls were met with silence, as if no one was on the other end, or she would hear faint sounds like breathing or mumbling, but could not discern any clear message. This pattern persisted, suggesting that it was not an error but an intentional act to intimidate her. The calls were made from an untraceable number, leaving Cindy in the dark about the identity of the caller. On one occasion, while at home with friends, Cindy answered the phone only to hear the familiar indiscernible noises. After hanging up, she noticed that the living room curtains, which she had previously closed, were now open. Startled, she closed the curtains and blinds, but the phone rang again. This time, the caller ominously remarked, "It's silly for you to hide. I know you're in the living room." This incident epitomized the terrifying reality Cindy faced daily, feeling watched yet unable to see her observer. The harassment escalated as Cindy began receiving bizarre letters in her mail. These letters, composed of newspaper clippings arranged to form threatening messages, conveyed ominous sentiments like, "Soon, Cindy, soon, and you're dead." Additionally, some letters contained violent imagery depicting assaulted women or a person brandishing a knife near a woman's image. Despite the palpable threat these letters posed, Cindy had no clue about their origin and had never encountered the sender. Fearing for her safety and unsure of what to do, Cindy sought advice from her parents and ex-husband Roy. Both her parents and Roy urged her to contact the police and file a formal complaint, which Cindy did on October 12, 1982. The police in their investigation interviewed Cindy's friends and family to ascertain if anyone bore a grudge against her or knew of someone who might wish her harm. However, their efforts yielded no leads. Cindy, known for her compassionate and helpful nature as a nurse devoted to aiding people and children, was widely regarded as a genuinely kind and generous individual. This raised the question, who would want to harm someone like Cindy? The police were unable to identify anyone who wished to harm Cindy James. Contrary to expectations that the situation would resolve after her complaint, the harassment persisted. Just 3 days later, while Cindy was in her kitchen, a brick shattered her window. Understandably alarmed, Cindy immediately contacted the police. On their arrival, officers conducted a thorough search of the house, yard, the alley behind the house, and the paths between the neighboring houses. Despite their efforts, they found no evidence of suspicious activity or clues to the perpetrator's identity. No witnesses had seen anyone, leaving the police with no leads. It seemed as though Cindy was being attacked by an unseen force. A week later, as Cindy prepared for bed, she encountered another disturbing scene. In her bedroom, she found her pillow slashed as if someone had attacked it with a knife. Cindy again called the police, who this time dispatched a different officer, Patrick McBride, to investigate. He thoroughly examined the surroundings and spoke with Cindy. After their discussion, he expressed his belief that Roy, Cindy's ex-husband, was responsible for the attacks. Cindy was skeptical, finding it hard to believe, especially since Roy had advised her to contact the police. Nevertheless, Pat was convinced that Roy was the culprit. To enhance Cindy's safety, Pat installed locks on all the doors and set up detectors in her house. He committed to checking on her daily and did so for nearly a month. During this time, Pat and Cindy grew close, eventually starting a romantic relationship. While Pat lived with Cindy, the harassment ceased. However, Pat remained vigilant, continuing to monitor the house's surroundings. One day, he encountered Roy near the back of the house and confronted him. Roy explained that he was concerned for Cindy's safety and was checking to ensure she was not in danger from her stalker. Pat, however, doubted Roy's explanation and maintained his suspicion that Roy was the one harassing Cindy. After a month, Cindy decided to end her cohabitation with Pat, though their relationship did not immediately dissolve. Once Pat left, the tranquility that had settled during his stay vanished, and the unsettling phone calls, letters, and noises resumed, marking the return of Cindy's nightmare. On one occasion, Cindy arrived home to a horrifying scene: 3 dead cats inside her house, accompanied by a chilling note stating, "You're next." In an effort to enhance her security, Cindy installed lights on her porch to potentially spot any intruders. However, she frequently found her porch lights and phone line broken. Despite repeatedly reporting these incidents to the police, their investigations yielded no evidence. There was no sign that anyone besides Cindy had been in or around the house. Not even footprints were found. As a result, the police decided to tap her phone in hopes of tracking the calls, but the brief duration of the calls hindered their ability to trace the caller's location. After some time, Cindy experienced her first physical attack. She had invited her close friend Agnes for a girls' night at her home. When Agnes arrived and noticed the house was dark, she suspected something was amiss. After attempting to reach Cindy without success, Agnes entered the house and found Cindy lying on the floor, unconscious, with her hands tied behind her back and a pair of nylon stockings wrapped tightly around her neck. Hans quickly removed the stockings, allowing Cindy to regain consciousness. Upon waking, Cindy could not recall the full extent of the attack. She remembered needing something from her garage, which required her to go outside as there was no direct access from inside the house. It was during this moment that she was attacked from behind and strangled with the stockings. The only detail Cindy could remember about her attacker was that they wore white sneakers, a common and non-distinctive feature. Realizing her life could not continue in this manner, Cindy decided to make a radical change. She altered her appearance, dyed her hair, and chose to move out of her current residence, changing her last name from Hack to James. This decision led her to return to the house she had previously shared with her ex-husband, who offered her the place to live while he moved elsewhere. Although Roy's gesture appeared helpful, the circumstances surrounding it raised suspicions. After relocating to her former home, she continued to discover unsettling items on her porch, such as piles of raw meat accompanied by threatening notes declaring, "You're mixed, and you are dead meat." These notes, crafted from newspaper clippings, reappeared relentlessly along with the resumption of mysterious phone calls, now directed to her new number at Roy's house. Cindy persistently contacted the police regarding these incidents, and they responded each time. However, the officers were unable to find any physical evidence or signs of anyone else's presence besides Cindy's. This lack of evidence led the police to grow skeptical about her claims, suspecting that she might be fabricating the events, a grave concern since police protection depends on the credibility of a victim. Cindy had been enduring this harassment for almost 7 years, facing different forms of torment daily. Throughout these 7 years, the police, repeatedly visiting her property and finding no leads, started to feel worn out by the case. Realizing the diminishing attention and belief from the police, Cindy decided to hire a private detective. The detective installed special motion-activated lights on her porch, designed to illuminate the area whenever someone approached. These lights were strategically placed to avoid tampering, as previous outdoor lights had been repeatedly broken. He also provided Cindy with a walkie-talkie equipped with a panic button, enabling her to alert him, the authorities, and paramedics in case of an emergency. This device also allowed him to listen in on Cindy's surroundings, offering a way to monitor her safety. 2 days after receiving the walkie-talkie, Cindy informed the detective of her intention to walk her dog, leaving the device at home. Upon her return, the detective heard through the walkie-talkie that she had entered the house. However, shortly afterward, he detected unusual noises, suggesting someone else was present with Cindy. Faced with the dilemma of potentially alerting the intruder by speaking, he chose to drive to Cindy's house in an attempt to catch the individual in the act. Upon his arrival at Cindy James' house, he found a dire situation. Opening the door, he discovered Cindy lying unconscious on the floor with a dagger embedded in her hand. Between her hand and the dagger was a note, and around her neck were black nylon stockings as if someone had attempted to strangle her. He immediately assisted Cindy, called for paramedics, and she was swiftly taken to the hospital. Still alive, the note reading "Your dead meat" was particularly noteworthy as it was handwritten, suggesting the possibility of obtaining fingerprints or analyzing the handwriting for clues. At the hospital, doctors noticed a syringe mark on Cindy's arm, indicating she had been injected with a sedative. When Cindy regained consciousness, she was questioned about any recollections of her attacker or the incident. Unfortunately, her memory was blank. She could only recall entering her house after walking her dog and being attacked from behind. Following the injection, her memory ceased, and she lost consciousness. Frustratingly, the police did not pursue any potential leads from the incident. They neglected to analyze the note for DNA or fingerprints, nor did they examine the dagger for any forensic evidence. Despite the presence of potential clues, the police remained convinced that Cindy was self-inflicting these wounds and orchestrating the entire scenario for attention. The private detective disagreed with the police's assessment and believed Cindy was not responsible for her own plight. Considering Cindy's history of being harassed for 7 years, he found it implausible that she would inflict such harm on herself, particularly in such a violent manner as her last attack. Resolute in finding the truth, he decided to explore the possibility of hypnosis, a common investigative technique in the 70s and 80s, to uncover any repressed memories Cindy might have of her assailant. However, the hypnosis session was unsuccessful, leaving Cindy's memory of the attack as elusive as ever. The possibility that Cindy's ex-partner, a psychiatrist, might have played a role in her amnesia was considered. Given his professional background, he could have had the knowledge and means to manipulate Cindy's memory using drugs or hypnotherapy. This theory, while speculative, raised questions about the extent of his involvement in her ordeal and the possibility of his using his expertise to conceal his actions. Despite the hypnosis session failing to unlock any memories for Cindy James, the police proceeded to administer a polygraph test. At the time, the polygraph was a widely used investigative tool, despite its reliability being questionable today. It is understood that a person who firmly believes in their version of events can pass a polygraph test. Cindy underwent the test and passed, indicating she was not lying according to the polygraph results. However, the police interpreted this outcome as Cindy being too traumatized to provide reliable results. This interpretation was in stark contrast to their earlier stance, where they believed Cindy was fabricating the events for attention, highlighting a contradiction in their approach and a reluctance to further investigate the case. Despite the police's skepticism, they decided to re-interview Roy, Cindy's ex-husband and a prime suspect due to his background as a psychiatrist and access to medications and knowledge that could be used to harm Cindy. However, Roy denied any involvement. He too passed a polygraph test, which further complicated the investigation. The police's interest in the case persisted, driven by the curiosity surrounding the unexplained events occurring around Cindy. To monitor the situation, the police discreetly stationed a patrol car near Cindy's house for a week. During this period, no unusual incidents were reported. It was on December 11, 1985, that Cindy was found in a critical state. She was unconscious with a black nylon stocking tied around her neck and a puncture mark on her arm from an injection. Cindy was physically battered and bore cuts on her body, but was alive. Taken to the hospital, she again had no memory of the attack upon regaining consciousness. After being discharged, Cindy, understandably frightened, invited her friend Agnes and Agnes' husband to stay at her house. That night, they reported hearing strange noises in the basement. Upon investigation, they discovered a fire in the basement. Agnes' husband noticed a person outside the house, not on the property but nearby and looking towards the house. The identity of this person remained unknown due to the darkness and the distance. When they attempted to call for help, they discovered the phone line was cut, prompting Agnes' husband to seek assistance from neighbors. The firefighters were called and successfully extinguished the fire. After the fire incident in Cindy James' basement, the police conducted a thorough examination of her house but found no evidence, such as footprints or any other signs of an intruder. Consequently, they concluded that Cindy was the one who started the fire. Due to their belief that Cindy was self-inflicting harm and the potential danger it posed, the police recommended she be admitted to a psychiatric institution. Feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about her situation, Cindy agreed to the hospitalization and spent the next 10 weeks in a psychiatric facility. On her release from the hospital, Cindy realized the importance of sharing her experiences and suspicions to shed light on the ongoing nightmare. She gathered her friends, family, and the police to disclose information she had previously withheld. Cindy revealed that during one of the attacks, the assailant had threatened to harm her family if she ever disclosed her beliefs about the identity of her attacker. She expressed a firm conviction that her ex-husband was the stalker. The police, prompted by Cindy's revelation, interrogated Roy once more. Despite Cindy's accusations, Roy maintained his innocence, asserting that he had always supported her, even advising her to contact the police and offering her a place to stay. To bolster his claim, Roy presented a recording he claimed to have captured on the answering machine at the house where Cindy was living, which was previously their shared home. The recording featured a female voice suggesting that a woman, not Roy, was harassing Cindy. The police's response to Roy's evidence and Cindy's accusations was disheartening. They seemed more inclined to believe that Cindy was fabricating the entire situation rather than pursuing leads that could reveal the true perpetrator. This approach led to a troubling scenario where the police favored Roy's narrative over Cindy's and hastily dismissed her claims. Roy further complicated matters by suggesting to the police that Cindy suffered from multiple personality disorder. This claim appeared baseless as no such diagnosis was made during Cindy's extended stay in the psychiatric hospital. Roy's insistence on this theory, coupled with his actions and concerns for Cindy that seemed inconsistent with his claims, cast doubt on his credibility. The overall situation presented a perplexing and unresolved puzzle, with the police fixated on discrediting Cindy rather than thoroughly investigating the case. On May 25, 1989, Cindy James started her day early, around 7 a.m., by going to the bank to deposit a check. She also visited a store to purchase groceries and had plans to meet with her best friend Agnes and Agnes' husband. Despite the police's suspicion that Cindy was fabricating the events surrounding her, their investigation continued. It's notable that over the 7 years of Cindy's case, the police spent an estimated $1,500,000 indicating the significant resources dedicated to the investigation. However, there was a sense of awareness from the police as if they were conducting the investigation out of obligation rather than genuine concern. On the day in question, when Agnes and her husband arrived at Cindy's house, they found it odd that she wasn't there. While an empty house might not usually cause concern, Cindy's situation was different due to the ongoing harassment she faced. Angus decided to alert the police while they searched for Cindy at places she might have visited, like the bank and the store. Their search led them to Cindy's car in the bank's parking lot. The presence of the car in the afternoon, after the bank's closing hours, raised alarm, especially considering her plans with her friends. Approaching the car, they found Cindy was not inside, deepening their concern. They went to the police station to report the situation. Despite initially being told they must wait 24 hours to file a missing person report, they convinced an officer to investigate due to the unique circumstances of Cindy's case. The officer, inspecting the car at night, discovered bloodstains on the driver's seat and found Cindy's purse, bank card, and a deposit receipt inside the car. The receipt showed Cindy had been at the bank early that morning. In the trunk were her grocery bags and a gift she had purchased for her friends at approximately 2:25 p.m. With this information, the police proceeded to Roy's apartment to question him. Arriving close to dawn, they found Roy at home. He explained that he had spent the afternoon and evening with a friend, having dinner and then staying at the friend's house until about 11:30 p.m. Roy's alibi appeared solid and could be corroborated, leading the police to continue their search for Cindy elsewhere. The disappearance of Cindy James mobilized the entire city of Richmond in a massive search operation. Helicopters, dogs, vehicles, and numerous people were deployed in an extensive effort to locate her. The search extended to various terrains, including underwater areas and the port, encompassing the wide radius around the location where her car was found. Despite the exhaustive efforts and resources utilized, Cindy remained missing. On June 8th of the same year, more than 2 weeks after her disappearance, Cindy was found in the yard of an abandoned house, approximately an hour and a half's distance from where her car had been located. The discovery was made in a region relatively close to the initial search area, which was surprising given the scale and intensity of the search efforts. The abandoned house, situated in an area frequented by many people, led investigators to theorize that Cindy could not have been left there for the entire duration of her disappearance. The likelihood of her being seen by passers-by in such a busy area suggested that she may have been held captive elsewhere before being left at the location. Cindy's body exhibited signs of severe physical abuse, including bruises, cuts, and a syringa injection mark on her arm. She was found with her hands and feet bound, and a black nylon stocking was tied around her neck, consistent with previous incidents. The autopsy revealed that Cindy had been injected with a substantial amount of morphine and another sedative medication, leading to the conclusion that she had been drugged and then strangled. The police's conclusion about the case was controversial and unexpected. They posited that Cindy had committed suicide by injecting herself with a lethal dose of morphine and another sedative, then walking a significant distance barefoot to the location where she was found. Remarkably, her feet were clean and her shoes were not found nearby. The police theorized that Cindy managed to tie her own hands and feet and strangle herself with the nylon stocking. This conclusion was met with skepticism and disbelief due to the implausibility of the scenario and the lack of concrete evidence to support such a theory. Several alternative theories have been proposed to explain Cindy's tragic fate. One theory suggests that her ex-husband was responsible for the harassment and attacks. This theory posits that Roy's apparent compassion and offers of help were tactics to divert suspicion from himself. Another theory implicates Pat, the police officer who developed a close relationship with Cindy. It suggests that Pat may have been her stalker, using his position to gain her trust and then resuming the harassment after their relationship ended. However, this theory is complicated by the lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crimes. A less credible theory is that Cindy was responsible for the attacks herself due to a mental disorder. This theory is largely dismissed due to the nature of her injuries and the circumstances of her death, which seem beyond the realm of self-infliction. Lastly, there is the possibility that an unknown stalker, unrelated to Cindy's close acquaintances, was responsible for the harassment and attacks. This theory considers the potential involvement of an outsider who targeted not only Cindy but potentially others as well. Each theory presents its own set of questions and uncertainties, leaving the true nature of Cindy James' tragic experiences unresolved. Wendy Jerome, a 19-year-old teenager, was sexually assaulted, beaten, and then brutally killed in 1984. It was the 2nd of November, 1984 in Rochester, New York, and everyone was busy with their Thanksgiving celebrations when this horrible incident took place. It was in the evening when Wendy left her house to deliver a birthday card to her best friend, who lived in the same neighborhood. She was expected home by 8 p.m. that night, but she never returned. When she did not return, her family became frantic and called the authorities for help in looking for their daughter. A few hours later, it was reported that Wendy's body was found near a dumpster behind a school. She had been sexually assaulted and later brutally murdered. The investigations began, and DNA samples were collected from Wendy's body in order to find the culprit. Unfortunately, forensic technology was not as advanced in the 1980s, and no matches were found for the next few decades. 36 years later, the investigations were reopened after Wendy's mother was adamant about getting justice for her daughter. The sample, taken back in 1984, had stayed preserved since then. It was once again entered into the DNA database and used to find relatives. Only this time, a match was found. It was a 54-year-old man named Timothy Williams, who lived in Melbourne, Florida. Timothy had lived in Rochester in 1984 and shared the same neighborhood as Wendy Jerome. However, the two did not know each other. Timothy was extradited back to Rochester from Florida immediately and was asked multiple questions regarding the murder. At first, he refused to recall any association with Wendy, but the amount of evidence against him was far too much to ignore. The DNA from the semen found on Wendy's body was an exact match to Timothy's DNA. There was no room for escape. He was charged with second-degree murder but was not charged with sexual assault, as those charges had expired over 10 years before Timothy was arrested. Almost 36 years later, Wendy Jerome got justice. While it was said that her father passed away before he could see the face of her murderer, her mother lived to see the day. She was reported saying, "I never thought I would see this day, and now it's here." Mrs. Jerome said, "I just wish my husband had been alive to see this. He passed away in 2011, and I know he's up there with her, smiling and saying it's over. It's finally over." Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.